Welcome to the Maui Liberty Network. I'm Joe Kent of the Maui Libertarian Party, and our co-host is Valerie Cisneros of Tea Party Maui. And with us today we have Phil Heath of the Libertarian Party and Pat Brock, who is also part of the Libertarian Party. And today we're talking about the top 10 worst laws on Maui that hurt business. We talked to business people from all over Maui and try to get their story. You talked to a lot of business people as well, and Valerie made a list and I made a list, and we tried to, with mathemagics and wizardry, we made a top 10 list. And so this is the ultimate top 10 list of laws that hurt business on Maui. By the way, if you think of an item that we didn't hit on our list, so please feel free to visit us at MauiLibertyNetwork.com, and we can try to add it to the show. With that said, on with the list. This is the Maui Liberty Network's top 10 worst laws that hurt business. Number 10 is licensing and permitting laws. When you think about all the different people on Maui that have to get licenses in order to do anything, the list goes on and on. We're going to put the list on your screen right now. Childcare workers, teachers, massage therapists, bicycle tourists, private detectives, activity desks, hearing aid fitters, restaurants, timeshare salespeople, travel agencies, and the list goes on and on and on. Some of these licenses take years and years to obtain. But the argument is that if people aren't licensed, then there's going to be bad actors. There's going to be people who give a bad massage. There's going to be a restaurant that doesn't do business right just because they don't have a license. Don't we need licenses?
There's bad actors in every single industry that I've worked. There's also great actors as well. The great ones get more business through word of mouth, through the internet, and through positive praise. I tell friends about, I had a great meal at this restaurant, so I go back there. If I had a bad meal, I don't recommend it anymore. So there's a lot of these licensing laws do not necessarily, they have, all the restaurants are licensed to operate in the business, but doesn't mean they have great food or great service.
So you're saying that if I wanted to go to a massage therapist who was unlicensed and they gave me a bad massage, then obviously I wouldn't go there again.
You wouldn't go there again. If they gave you a bad massage, you probably would say, I would recommend that you avoid that massage therapist.
Right.
I would go somewhere else.
And is there any kind of licensing in the free market? In other words, isn't there some cases where we need licenses, and how would the free market deal with that?
Libertarians have advocated private certification organizations where people could contract to be tested and graded by the certification, some sort of a private certification board.
Like underwater laboratory, UL, on all the electric.
That's an excellent example, yeah. And so people could check with private certification organizations and find out how service providers or product providers rate among their peers.
Okay. Is there any other licenses that you can think of around Maui or just a funny licensing law?
Yeah, I was talking to a commercial fisherman recently in my neighborhood, and I thought it was really amazing just how many things that he has to go through just to be able to catch fish for the local restaurants. And I didn't realize that a fisherman has to have a commercial license, for fishing license to fish, and then you have to have another license to drive the boat. And then if you want to go bottom fishing, you have to have a different license. And then if you need to fish near Kaho'olawe, you need a different license. And they must report how many fish they catch. And if this goes to the DLNR and the state aquatic resources. And if they're bottom fishing, they can't go. They can't bring along like their son or their grandfather or anything, unless the son or grandfather has also a license to bottom fish.
Really? So if a dad and a son want to go fishing, the son's just coming along for the ride. He's not doing any fishing, and you need 2 licenses.
Yes.
To go. Oh, wow.
Of course, if no one sees you fishing, that's no problem. But if someone does, they can be penalized and fined, and licenses can be revoked, and then he can lose his license and not be able to make a living.
It reminds me of something that Lawrence Carnicelli once told me, which is that if something is, if you need a license for something, that means it's illegal to do it naturally. So it's illegal to fish, it's illegal to drive, it's illegal to do business with anyone unless you get a license. And so basically everything's illegal today. And we've got all these licenses to sort of make us feel like we're living free, when really we're not as free as we think. So,
also with licensing, we have the strictest requirements for licensing than anywhere else in the 50 states. So the restrictions that the state puts on it are higher than every other state in the union.
I didn't know that.
There's another aspect to licensing that I've noticed in Hawaii, particularly building contractors. It's not enough to pay the fee and prove that you know your job. You also have to spend an internship or an apprenticeship with somebody who's already in the business, and you have to get a signature from them, a validation from them to get the license to compete with them. So that's kind of a conflict of interest there.
Even if you've been in that same industry, licensed contractor in another state, there's no reciprocity between states.
Well, that brings us to our number 9 item on the list. And here is, okay, so now number 9. Okay, number 9 on our list is building permits. If anyone wants to build a building, alter a building, make changes to a building that already exists, they need to get a building permit. These building permits can take months and months, sometimes years to obtain. I knew, actually yesterday I just talked to a contractor who was just trying to renovate a house. And the owner of the house said he wanted to put a screen door on the house. Well, in order to put that one screen door up, it took 6 months to wait for this building permit. And the building permit sat in the building department's office for a long time. He called, sometimes they'd be on vacation. And in the meantime, his competitors were skirting the law. They would just try to do business without getting the permits, and they get all the customers. And so the only way to make it in the system is to be a criminal. Now, the guy I talked to, he said he had it, he'd done this for 27 years, and he was at his last straw, and I have a feeling there's a lot of people like that. The argument about building permits is that, well, then someone's going to build a building that's bad. What sort of arguments do you have against that?
I sort of wonder myself, when I first moved here almost 20 years ago, I guess there weren't quite so many of these permits and necessary. You saw the houses didn't match. You drive through any neighborhood and everyone has a house that looks however they want their house to look. And I just don't see a big problem with that. I mean, now where I come from, and so many places on the mainland, all the houses look exactly the same. I often wonder how people find their houses at night, especially if they've had a few cocktails or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really quite understand. I'm sure it's I'm sure it's for our own good and our own safety, because that's usually the way. That's always the rationale, since we're mostly treated like kindergartners, and the government needs to protect us at all turns.
But when it comes to building permits, actually they're very closely related to zoning laws as well, because it depends on where you're zoned, what building permits you need to follow. Right. If you buy land that's on the ocean side of the road, watch out, because that land is called SMA land, or shoreline management area land. that land has about 10 times more restrictions and regulations that you have to follow when it comes to building permits. So this screen door thing would only happen on an SMA land property. All this stuff does is raise the price of buildings and raise the price of
Your rent.
land. And
Your rent, your
It
housing.
contributes to homelessness.
Yeah.
Oh, I never thought about that.
The Cato Institute that did a study that they estimated that at least nationwide, about 40% of housing costs go to meeting regulations and covering permit fees and things like that.
I know an individual who he thought he was following the law. He read all the building permits, he read all the licensing, he thought he was following the law to the letter. And then he realized that he was on SMA land, which was closer to the ocean, and he was subject to a whole host of different laws. So when he found that out, he realized that he had a rock wall that was 6 feet high when the requirement on the SMA land was 5 feet high. And so he said, well, I'll just take some of the rocks off. But no, he was fined about $60,000 just for that rock wall. It was this kind of thing happens all the time. Sign laws. A sign has to be smaller on SMA land. There's all sorts of kind of weird laws when it comes to where your business can be and where your shed can be and all this stuff.
And the size of your home, if you want to build a tiny home, you're not allowed to under the county rules right now.
Oh, really?
Yes, you can't. I have friends of mine on this island that want to build a small shack, small to live in, because it's more affordable and you can actually afford to build it. But county has restrictions on that as of today.
You know what all this stuff reminds me of is that our property isn't really our property. When it comes to property rights, you actually don't own your property. It's the government that owns it, and you're borrowing it from them. Mm-hmm. So if you own something on your land, you should be able to do what you want on that land. As long as you're not polluting someone else's land or polluting someone else's air, you should be able to do what you want on your own property. And that obviously is the libertarian philosophy standpoint of that. So.
I agree. There was one business owner I spoke with, they're building a new building, and they had to stop construction. They were almost done, and then they had to stop because they didn't have a water fountain built in this building. And so they had to send their plans back to the architect and get it redone so they could go back and put in water fountains, because we all need water fountains, right?
Yeah, I kind of wonder, there's a lot of run-down buildings on Maui. You kind of think, well, why are they run down? Why don't they just update it? And then you realize that, oh yeah, it's because it takes forever to do that. So it's easier to just ignore it. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. And that brings us to number 8.
1 second.
Oh, okay. All right, number 8. Is it 8? Are we at 8 already?
Unions, yeah.
Number 8 is, I put the National Labor Relations Act. Don't turn your channel. Don't touch that dial. It's not as boring as it sounds. The National Labor Relations Act is a law that basically says businesses aren't allowed to discriminate against unions. And you think, well, businesses shouldn't discriminate anyways, but I think they should be allowed to discriminate when it comes to unions. For example, let's pretend that I have a business and someone applies at my business and they give me the application and I read it and it says, I want to work at your company and I want to start a union at your company and I want to organize everyone in your company to start a union. And obviously as a business owner, I think, well, that's going to hurt my business. So I'm just going to throw their application in the trash. Well, what this law says is if you ignore that application, it's actually against the law. And there's been many cases where these people have sued the business for not hiring them. It's illegal to fire someone just because they're part of a union. And what this law does is it gives unions power. And I think if the law was abolished, then businesses would have the freedom to hire and fire who they want, whether they're in a union or not. and and then the free market would take over. So I think that unions are one of the biggest hurtful things to business, and this is the one law that keeps them all in place. Now,
Aren't you forced to be in a union, Joe?
I am forced to be in a union. In Hawaii, I am part of the teachers union, and I sit in the meetings and I pay the fees, and I never elected to be in this union, but I'm still part of it. So, yeah.
It certainly seems like companies ought to have the choice. They could sign a contract with the union and have a ready-made workforce, probably trained, well-trained, and ready to go, or choose to hire everyone individually and train them themselves. It would seem that either way would be a possible way for a company to go.
Do you think that if this law were abolished, that there would be no more unions?
I wouldn't think so. Like the United Auto Workers. I mean, once again, if you open an auto factory and you want to start making cars, if you go to the United Auto Workers, they ought to be able to supply you with a workforce that's already been tested and trained and get started right away.
Okay, so there'd be kind of free market unions, and if the union wanted to all do a walkout, they could, and the business could negotiate with them or not, or
before this law was passed, unions had the ability and the right to go on strike immediately and not have to give 30 days notice.
That's interesting.
So it cuts a little bit both ways, but it cuts both ways. There's restrictions on them that they don't have right now, that they had before.
Well, all I know is unions hurt business, and when you think about all the unions in Hawaii, there's the shipping union, construction union, medical union, teachers union. It goes on and on. Just think about all the business that's lost to union activity. So, number 8 was unions. Okay. Number 7, if you're just tuning in, this is the Maui Liberty Network. We're talking about the top 10 worst laws that hurt business in Hawaii, and now we're on to number 7. Number 7 is welfare and unemployment. You know, Hawaii has the highest welfare in the nation. Have you heard that before? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it also has the highest unemployment payout. Well, not the highest, it actually has among the highest unemployment payouts as well. You talk about welfare. If you're a single mother of 2, you can make almost $50,000 a year in Hawaii. That's more than I make. That's more than probably a lot of us make. And when it costs, when you get more money when you don't work, then obviously it's going to stop people from trying to find a job.
They don't have incentive. Why would they? Why? There's a lot of people who don't mind having somebody else to pay for all their expenses, and if they get enough to pay their rent, it kills the person's incentive. They become dependent on somebody else to take care of them, which is very, very dangerous.
Well, obviously the argument to it, though, is that, well, who's going to help the poor? So who's going to help the poor?
You're not helping the poor by having them being dependent on welfare for the rest of their lives. How is that helping the poor?
That's a good point. And I think that the best, if you're talking about what is the best system to help the poor, is free market capitalism and job creation. And if people aren't looking for jobs, then they're not creating jobs. So, anyways, that's my number 7, welfare. Number 6 is the Public Utilities Commission. Have you ever wondered why your electric bill is so high, or why you run out of water, why there's a drought in water? Things like this have to do with the Public Utilities Commission. Basically, it's public utilities. So the phone lines, the water lines, the sewage lines, the transportation, avenues, electric lines, all these things, anything that has to do with lines, I guess, is you've got the Public Utilities Commission, infrastructure. So why does this hurt business? Well, if you've ever looked at your electricity bill, you know why. It costs a lot of money to run any kind of energy on Maui. If you've got a business based on energy, look out. The same thing with water and even telecommunications. And it used to be that the Public Utilities Commission regulated the phone lines so that there was a monopoly in the phone lines. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And now that's changed.
It has changed. But there's an interesting thing that the federal government now forces the phone companies, like Hawaiian Tel, is forced to sell to allow other companies, their direct competition, to use their facilities and sell it at a cheaper rate. So there's a few other companies that use their facilities. They set up in Hawaiian Tel's central office, and they set up their equipment, and the government mandates that those companies can sell their product cheaper than Hawaiian Tel or whoever the main company is. And I think that's just not...
I mean, on the one hand, it's kind of like the government sees that there's value in a free market system, so then it does a top-down version of value and says, you businesses have to act like free market. Mm-hmm. And even if the free market would never do that, right? You have to pretend like you're free market actors, and so you have to allow them to go in your building and they can use your things and so on. But in the free market, it happens naturally.
They had a monopoly to begin with, so they're I guess overcompensating for that fact. I don't know if it's better or not, but I think it's it's not the right way to do it. But I understand why they did it that way. But there are better ways to do it than that.
I mean, the argument is that, well, who would run the buses? Who would run the transportation? Who would run the electricity?
Speaking of buses, when I was in Mexico, buses run every single minute in Cancun. I didn't have to wait more than a minute to catch a bus. It costs about $1 to catch the bus. It'd take me into town. Here, if I miss the bus, and you got to wait another hour for that bus to come back. So I like there was about 50 companies that were operating bus. Each bus driver had their own bus company.
Free market buses.
Yes.
And here they're subsidized, right?
They are subsidized.
Yeah.
Yes.
The buses here. The bus system.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean,
subsidized.
the public bus system is millions of dollars in the hole every year, and they subsidize it. And so the argument is, well, if we don't have the government creating these utility monopolies, then everything's going to go to pieces. But it reminds me of something Murray Rothbard once said, which is that if the shoe industry were run by the government, right, and for all our lives, the shoe industry, governments made shoes, then if we were to privatize shoes, then we'd say, well, how would it work? Who would sell the shoes? Who would make the shoes? Where would they be made? Where would they be sold? Who would buy the shoes? And the only answer that you'd be able to give is, well, the free market would handle it. And that's kind of what we have to say when it comes to these public utilities. But by the same token, we have to remember that everyone loves their shoes, and they buy the shoes they want at the price that they're willing to pay. And there's no shortage of shoes out there, but there is a shortage of water, and there's a shortage of, have you ever heard of a brownout or a blackout? I mean, there's shortages of electricity all the time. All this stuff has to do with the Public Utilities Commission, and I believe it could be gotten rid of, and business would be better for it.
Number 5 that I'd like to talk about is the Liquor Commission. So I've spent a little time interviewing some small business people, and I spent quite a bit of time with someone that runs a local bar restaurant, and I was so amazed with all of the little Menini laws that they have, and I'm sure I only heard like the tiniest little section of what they have, but so I'm going to start with this. Okay. The Liquor Commission is a county board, and it consists of about a dozen people, and there are about 10 liquor control officers on Maui, and they stop and check on things randomly and often. So a bar owner must have a permit to have a dance floor, and the dance floor must be a minimum of 10 by 10. There is no alcohol allowed on the dance floor, and no one is allowed to dance outside of the confines of the dance floor. And no drinks are allowed in the bathroom because someone underage might actually drink in the bathroom. You can't allow glass in the bathroom because someone might break a glass in the bathroom. Again, it's the kindergarten mentality. They have requirements that the bartenders have to use approved jiggers with certain sizes. So there's no just pouring directly out of a bottle, or you see in some movies where there's all these theatrics of.
Right, okay, yeah.
That's not allowed. They have to use approved jiggers or they'll be fined. You cannot pour straight from the bottle to the glass. And it's illegal to infuse alcohol with fruit or cinnamon sticks or anything like that. They consider that manufacturing alcohol, and that is not allowed. And then a bar owner only gets 3 points, I guess, for the life of the business. And if these points are taken away, a business can be closed. Fines, it appears, are pretty arbitrary. And the one thing I thought was the most amazing is that a bar owner must have security at, say, front door, back door, side door, and by the dance floor to make sure nobody goes on with a drink, and by the bathroom to make sure nobody goes into the men's room, and one by the ladies' room to make sure no one goes into the ladies' room. And so this security costs the bar owner, say, around $20 an hour per person, and they pay, say, 4 to 7 hours a night. So anytime that there's live music or any music, even recorded music, they need to make sure that someone is watching so they can comply with all of these rules so that they don't get their licenses revoked. And the band members are not allowed to have any drinks on the bar either. And when the kitchen is open, all of these laws completely change. So I think on a slow night, what I was told is the bar owner will choose, if the night is slow, just to close early, because otherwise he has to pay all of the security. So he'll just close, losing any chance of making any money at all. Because so if they just cannot make a profit that way. It's they just don't want to incur the cost of all the security. So
wow, can someone remind me? Are we still in prohibition? I can't remember. After that list,
you can't get drunk in the bar on Maui. You cannot be drunk, or the bar owner will be sued. And
it makes me wonder if the cost of going to a bar is higher on Maui. I mean, I don't go to many bars. Phil, aren't you the resident expert? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't drink either, but I know it is very expensive to buy a glass of wine or beer.
I mean, if you're paying for the security at the bathrooms, at each bathroom, and the exits and all that, obviously
it's cheap. It's cheaper at home in every state.
Yeah, right.
That's a good point.
Right, but it does all of that cost rolls down to the customers in every way. It's bad for business.
Well, if you think about the main engine of our economy in Hawaii is tourism, and obviously liquor plays a part in that. I mean, the tourists want to go here to escape.
You also can't bring liquor on the beach too. I mean, it's not enforced, thank goodness, but it's or selectively enforced.
Right.
But that's
relatively recent.
Is that recent?
Changed that, yeah.
And I would like to clarify that it's not required, all of this security, but if one of these officers comes in and sees any of these laws being not violated, then they're in trouble. So really, they don't have to have all those, but it behooves them to hire all of these people to keep an eye on things so they don't lose their license and therefore lose their business.
I wonder if there's some restaurants that have kind of said, well, the only way we can make it is to not sell liquor anymore. Or I'm sure that's what's happened.
Right.
Denny's used to sell liquor when they first opened up, and they closed their bar.
Yeah.
So,
getting a liquor license is huge. I hear it's huge to get a liquor license.
I don't drink anymore, but I wanted to buy alcohol after 10:50 at night. I mean, you can't buy alcohol in a supermarket after 10:50 at night.
10:50.
10:50. Even though I was sober, hadn't had anything to drink, I wanted to get. I had to go out at 6 o'clock in the morning to get the beer before I went on the boat. I wasn't going to drink any of the alcohol. I hadn't had one sip of alcohol, and I could not buy beer.
But you could have if you would have got there before 10:50.
Right, but I was.
That's arbitrary.
It's arbitrary. I'm sober. I'm not drunk. I can't buy alcohol when I want to buy alcohol, and it's a type of prohibition. At least they sell in the supermarkets here. There are some states that have blue laws. You can't buy beer on Sundays, and you can't buy beer on Sundays. And some states they have liquor stores right next to the supermarket, and it always perplexed my mind why they had restrictions like that. And it's because they can't sell beer. It has to be in a state-run store.
And I think the law is 11 o'clock. It's just that the markets and liquor stores don't want to run afoul of the liquor board.
If you're in line at 10:50, but somebody in front of you has a lot of items and it's 11:01, then they just cut it off at 10:50 just to play it safe, so they don't have that happen. So.
Okay, well, unless you have something else to say, that is our number 4 pick is liquor laws.
5.
Our number 5 pick is liquor laws. Okay. Okay, number 4. Now, if you're just tuning in, this is the Maui Liberty Network's top 10 list of laws that hurt business in Hawaii. And warning, 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 we're talking about taxes here, so don't doze off. We're going to try to get through this real quick. I guess 3 big taxes that hurt business are GE tax, the TAT tax, and the income tax. And the GE tax is a small tax. It's only 4%, but it's on every single transaction there is. So if you buy something and then you sell it to someone, then you use it for something, and then the whole line, whenever you're exchanging it, you have to pay that 4%. So then it piles up and it snowballs into a really big into an avalanche. The GE tax is just actually our state is, I think, the only state to have a tax like that, a GE tax.
If you can verify that you're selling it to somebody else, you can buy it for 0.5% rather than 4%.
I'm lost.
If you're a contractor, you're buying lumber and you're building a house and selling it to a potential homeowner,
all right,
you can pay 0.5% for the lumber or anything that you put into the house because you're going to resell it. So if it's only the ultimate consumer has to pay the entire 4%.
End user. End user, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, that's one of those job killer taxes. And another one is the TAT tax, which is the transient accommodations tax. Basically, it's a hotel tax. And so you ask yourself, what is the biggest industry in Hawaii? Obviously, is tourism. So let's take those tourists and let's tax them. And right now, it's about 13% for hotels when you include the GE tax. Now, there's something wrong with that. When you take here's the milk and bread for our state, and let's tax it as much as possible. Obviously, less tourists will come here. And if less tourists come here and visit the hotels, then less tourists come and visit all the other things that the tourist industries. So that is really another one of those crippling taxes. And then, of course, the income tax, which varies on what income you are. For me, it's about 8%, but I did have to pay something like $9,000 or $10,000 in taxes last year just for my income, and I thought, wow, I wish I could keep that money and buy a car or something. Well, what are your opinions about taxes?
I am amazed that so many tourists still come here with as expensive as everything is and how much the rooms are, and yeah, I'm just amazed we still have as many tourists as we do.
Yes.
Because the price of food, everything is so high, and it's got to be cheaper to go to Mexico, and they have sandy beaches too. And I personally like Maui much better. But wow, if I was trying to take a family of 5 or 3 on vacation, I don't think I would come here. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
We have a tax on all food that's purchased, even fruit and vegetables at the supermarket. They have a general excise tax on everything except incidentally a newspaper. So every other product out there except the newspaper has a general excise tax.
Yeah.
I guess when they're proposing it, the newspapers didn't want that to happen. They had a lot of influence. I wonder why.
Prescription drugs are exempted too.
They are? Prescription drugs?
One thing about the GE tax that I really didn't realize, I was paying that tax for doing business for so many years. And then one time because you figure what you sold and then, your total amount, and you put the 0.04167 on there, and you get that total. But then when you pay the tax, you pay it on that total instead of on the amount of goods and services you provided. Which I thought, I must be doing something wrong here. This can't possibly be right. I think I've been paying too much tax all these years. So I called a friend of mine who knows more about that stuff, and she said, no, that's the way it works. That's the way it works.
It's like a double tax.
It's a double tax.
Double, triple, quadruple, on up the multiples. And you kind of ask, well, why do we need taxes? Why do we need, for example, an income tax? Obviously, we need the income tax. I mean, it would be almost unthinkable to get rid of it in Hawaii. But then you also have to ask, well, many states don't have an income tax. Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Washington, all without an income tax.
New Hampshire?
Oh, New Hampshire is another one? I didn't know that. And
Tennessee?
Montana.
Tennessee?
Montana does not either.
Oh, I guess I didn't know
Montana
that.
has no sales tax. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So our number 4 pick for laws that hurt business, taxes. Okay. Number 3 is the planning department. And basically, when I say planning department does come up with a lot of these kind of silly laws. But really, we're talking about any kind of silly law that's arbitrary in Hawaii about business. And the planning department has a lot of them. When it comes to a home business, the planning department creates the rules for that. So if you want to start a business in your house, they've made a rule that you and only one other person can be employed by that business. It can't be 3 people in the business, only 2. 40% of your house can be used for the business. So if you use the living room to do business work, you're not allowed to go into the garage to store something. And storing something is another thing. If you wanted to have some sort of like a sewing machine or some sort of like leather making tool, and you put it in your garage, you're trying to run a leather making thing, that's not allowed. You can only have equipment that would already have been in your house, something like a refrigerator. Like things that people have in their houses. And these are all opinions, right? And, there's so many of these kind of silly, arbitrary regulations that somebody thought was a good idea, but I think everyone in the planning department, they work really hard, and all of them making trouble. Here's an example of parking lot laws. They've got, this is a document with all the parking lot regulations. It says, a bowling alley must have 5 parking spaces for each alley. A bed and breakfast must have 1 parking space for each bedroom. Well, of course, why would a bed and breakfast not have a parking spot for its customers? And but these people think that the only way that the economy works is from a top-down view. But I think a bottom-up view works. I think people would create their own prosperity and their own great ideas themselves.
I spoke with a contractor, and he was telling me about the rules around, it's the landscape planting plan permit for parking lots. And this permit provides a means to encourage the choosing and the planting of trees. And I was told about the expense of planting trees. Every 5 spaces, you're supposed to have a tree in the big parking lots, in newer construction things. And you'll notice most parking lots that are newer you go to, there are a lot of trees. So I have a diagram for that too, and it actually shows 5 spaces a tree, 5 spaces. So that's a place a car can't park. So that's a customer that can't go in the store and spend money, and that, if you don't think that adds up pretty quickly economically, it does. Now, I know I've seen a lot of parking lots where they don't really take up a whole space. It'll be like a diamond or a square or a circle or something, so a car still can park there. It's just that the parking spaces are a little bit smaller. But I was wondering, I stopped by the planning department and I asked them, what is the reasoning for planting all these trees in the parking lot? And the woman said to me, well, you can't have people just pulling into a parking lot and all they see is parked cars. And I thought,
isn't that what's in a parking lot?
I know. But I guess the government feels that it's important to make sure that they've enhanced the quality of the environment and that we provide shade, comfort, and tranquility. So that's very important.
All right, that's just, oh yeah, go ahead.
But the cost of putting in that extra concrete, digging those holes, the irrigation for it, and I hear there's about a 70-some page document about as to what kind of trees you have to have. And there's shrubs for in between the buildings. There has to be shrubs if you're up against another property. And I guess this list is so complicated of what kind of trees you have. I know a small business owner that just opened a very small restaurant and had the whole thing almost done. And then the planning department didn't approve of the kind of trees that they chose, even though the guy had spent, he said, like a month trying to read the 70 pages and figure out what was the correct kind of trees and shrubs. Well, then I guess the planning department was okay with it, but the planning department is not the only people that you have to talk to. You have to have further review, or a further review may be required by the arborist committee. And the arborist committee has much power of its own.
They've got their own rules.
They've got
obviously.
their own rules.
I mean, when it comes to laws like this, you kind of think, well, it's just trees, it's just a parking lot, but really, it all adds up. All these little rules. I mean, this is just this is just some of the rules, just a tiny fraction of the rules that they put out, and it all adds up, and it all hurts business.
Pretty much every parking lot I've been in has lots of trees in it. Whether I travel outside of the state of Hawaii, they have trees in the parking lot because customers demand it. Customers want it. It adds value to the property, and people want to add value to the property that they own. They don't want it to increase in value. So they're
right. The argument is that, well, if there was no planning department, then there would be no trees in parking lots.
There's in Houston, Texas, I read a study that they have more trees than any big city in the United States, but they have no planning department or zoning laws.
Right. And I believe the trees are great. I'm not saying I have anything against trees, but I do not think the government should be mandating trees in parking lots.
I agree.
And it's just such a further expense that, again, rolls down to the end user who's buying things in that store or eating at that restaurant or whatever. It all rolls down to us. Yeah.
Okay, that was number 2, I believe.
3.
Oh, that was number 3, the planning department.
Joe and I agreed on the number 2 choice for the most harmful laws to business, and that is what has affectionately become known as Obamacare, officially named the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. This law is over 2,000 pages long, and the subsequent clarifying language and guidance has exceeded 20,000 pages so far. The law has been in existence since March of 2010, and with many of these provisions and rates are going into effect in January of 2014. The law is slated to be phased in over the span of 8 years.
So here it comes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so why does Obamacare, why does Hawaii healthcare, why does it hurt business? I mean, I can see that, yes, we've got an extra cost, but why does that hurt business?
Yeah, I don't understand. Supposedly there was, 12, I don't remember, a few million people that didn't have health care insurance. So 15 million. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so rather than just implement something by government to see that those people are insured. The entire system had to be renovated, causing a hardship to everyone, which, and of course, small businesses that are still trying to figure out the mathematics of all this.
I think if you have a full-time employee, I mean, this is Hawaii's healthcare, right? If you have full-time employees, then you have to pay for their healthcare. Am I wrong about that?
If they're over 20 hours a week.
If they're over 20 hours, so
they'll have a lot of employees have work for 19 hours.
So a lot of employees work for 19 and a half hours, right up to the mark, and then they have to have another part-time job and another. So they're working three times as much when they could just work at one job. They've had one schedule. They could have time to see their kids, and they wouldn't have to worry about. And they could get their health care on their own without having to worry about their employer.
And this is what's happening across the whole nation. Employers are laying off millions of workers because they're dropping them down to part-time so they don't have to pay this. And it's hurting the economy. It's a disaster.
It's hurting people. It's causing
the middle class.
It's harming people. They're getting unemployed. They're unemployed. They're not working as much, and they have to get a second or a third part-time job. So
right.
It looks like. Anecdotally, it looks like I'm going to effectively lose my health insurance. President Obama promised that I could keep my health insurance, except the current policy I have expires at the end of the year, and new policies are going to be issued. One that compares with mine, I'm paying a little over $400 without drug, without dental, which was okay by me. Apparently, I will be compelled to have those services in the future. The policy was actually a little bit cheaper, except for the deductible. My old policy was $150. The deductible for this new cheaper policy is $6,350. So I will have to pay, and I don't understand how this dovetails with the you can't pay cash, because apparently I'm expected to pay all the way up to the $650 before the insurance will take effect.
Well, I think it boils down to nobody knows what's going on, and even the people that do, the rules are changing. So,
right.
So even the people, like you went to a meeting where they explained this, but I have a feeling they probably just learned it the day before themselves.
Well, they all said that the only constant in this bill is change, and it's just constantly changing. Yeah, I went to this 3-hour forum that the Chamber of Commerce put on, and the insurance companies came and they talked about it quite a bit, but. Yeah, it's definitely in flux,
I guess he kept his campaign promise then.
What was that?
It's always in change, so I guess
change.
Right, change you can believe in.
I mean, I don't want to bash too much, because I always like to try to see what the other side of the coin is, and let me try to play devil's advocate. If healthcare were left up to the free market, then hospitals would just charge through the roof, and doctors would just charge through the roof. And insurance companies would, if anyone had a scraped knee, they'd get rid of them. And what's to say that the free market wouldn't do it worse?
But LASIK surgery is one of the few things that's not covered by any insurance plan, and they're one of the few parts of the medical business that has decreased costs. Costs are going down every single year.
It's privatized.
Well, they have to pay by cash. People are paying by cash for LASIK surgery. For eye surgery. They don't have that with almost every other form of insurance. It's covering other things except LASIK surgery. I don't know of any policy that covers LASIK surgery.
You're saying that right now we don't have a free market healthcare system as it is.
As it is, except in that one niche area.
Except for that niche area, and the niche area is improving.
Well, the costs are going down, and there has been improvements in it. So costs go down, and that's how it is in the computer industry, in the cell phone industry. Costs are going down or stay the same,
and they're getting cheaper,
or the costs of the computers stay the same, but they're twice as powerful as last year's model. So you're getting better products for the same price, and the costs are going down.
I mean, I guess I have to say that when I look at the world and I look at all the miracles and the benefits that the free market provides us, you have to ask, why wouldn't this work in healthcare? And Obamacare is just the opposite of that. So.
Right. So let me go on with, there's a tax on health insurance companies. So there'll be an annual tax on health insurance companies. And that is an $8 billion tax next year. And then it goes up in 2015 to $11.3 billion. And by 2017, it will be a $13.9 billion tax. And that will definitely be passed on to the individuals. And then there is an Obamacare tax on union members and early retiree health insurance plans. This one, my brother retired from IBM when he was pretty young, like 45 or something. He'd already worked 25 years, and he's been getting insurance through IBM since. And the insurance cost of these, they're calling these Cadillac plans, are going to be taxed at 40%. That's pretty high tax there.
Yeah, you think there's very few things in the world that are taxed at 40%. Why not tax it 60%? Why not 70? Why not, you know?
And they might.
Don't give them ideas, Joe.
Sorry. Delete that, edit it, cut.
There's a comparative effectiveness research fee, which will be $1 per member per year. A reinsurance program fee, which is $63 per member per year. Just the names of these fees is just, I don't know, they're pretty, I'm sure they've just really had to work hard to come up with all these
Sounds
ideas.
like a telephone bill.
Yeah. And in 2014, there will be a $2.5 billion tax on pharmaceutical companies, which will definitely affect all of us. And it's been said absolutely that more mandates, taxes, and legislative compliance will generate higher costs. And you may think you won't be affected, but you will. And my final thing is that tax compliance for Obamacare amounts to 80 million hours. The Ways and Means Committee has compiled this estimate of how many hours it will take to comply with these taxes. And based on IRS estimates, it will take nearly 80 million hours for family and businesses to comply with these taxes.
It's kind of like someone has to teach us about what the new system is. Someone has to administer the new system, and those jobs are also built into the taxes, into the cost of it. And so there's a lot of new jobs being created, except they're these.
They don't create any wealth. They don't bring a new medical product to the market or anything like that.
Right. Well, we'll see in 2014.
It's a quagmire.
Number 2 on the laws that hurt business is Obamacare. Okay. Number 1, we can fire through this pretty quick. It is the Jones Act. The Jones Act is a shipping law that prohibits any foreign ships from traveling between American ports. So if a Hong Kong ship came to Hawaii, it could not then go on to the mainland. It would be illegal for that to happen. If a Hong Kong ship went to the mainland, it could not then stop off in Hawaii. So obviously, that's gonna, if a ship has to pick between Hawaii, or can I go to Hawaii, or should I go to the mainland, obviously they're gonna pick going to the mainland, and they skip Hawaii completely. And then whatever goods need to be shipped here overseas are double shipped here, and that raises the cost for everyone. I've read estimates that say that if the Jones Act were abolished, our shipping costs would decrease to the point where almost everything in Hawaii would be cheaper, and some things would be quite a bit cheaper. Some say as much as 30% cheaper. When you think about all the things that go into what does it take to make a business? What does it take to make a building, to make a chicken fence, to make all the things that it takes to run business? And you put a huge cost to that because of the Jones Act. That's why we put that as number 1 on our list, because it does affect every single area of our lives. Can you imagine a world an island where everything was 30% cheaper, or a lot of things were. I mean, we might have things that are even cheaper than the mainland. If you think about it, things that, since we're so close to the international waters, we might have cheaper goods here. The cost of gas would be cheaper, the cost of everything. So it's hard to understate overstate how important this Jones Act issue really is.
It really would be paradise here.
Right.
Because it's kind of a tough place to live at this time.
I like to call the Jones Act the Matson Protection Act. And one of the arguments that happened before the incident in Honolulu last week was the...
You're talking about the molasses.
The Jones Act, there's 2 shipping companies that are allowed to ship into Hawaii. One of them is Matson, and they just spilled thousands of gallons of molasses into the Honolulu harbor. So they're killing the marine lives, and they're protected by the Jones Act from having foreign competition. So they're not doing a good job. Plus, they're protected by this law. They should have to at least face competition, which they don't currently have to do.
So they can be a bad actor in the marketplace.
They are a bad actor.
They don't get punished.
They are a bad actor. If you're spilling oil, if you're spilling molasses into the ocean, you are a bad actor. They should be punished. And the market would punish it if there was more than 2 providers of shipping out of the state and shipping to the state. There would be more.
Right.
There's not enough competition to meet the demand.
So you're talking about if there was 10 different shipping companies, I would choose the one that polluted the least. And,
right.
Yeah.
We wouldn't spill stuff on the harbor. I mean, I don't want that. No one wants that. I don't think Matson wants that, but they repeatedly they've done it on more than one occasion, unfortunately.
And not only that, I know that there was an oil spill recently, not recent, a couple years ago, and international ships were barred from helping out with the cleanup efforts.
Yeah,
You're talking about the Gulf of Mexico.
There you go.
Mexico?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so an international ship, you think, well, why an international ship could just come to port, but then it couldn't help and then go back to port, and then so they were barred from helping us at all. And
President Obama did have an exemption when they had the hurricane in New York City to help out with the hurricane relief effort. So he has had a temporary relief effort for New York and New Jersey. That just happened right before the re-election campaign.
so it goes to show that the people in charge know that it's a bad law and they get rid of it when they really need it. But when everyone's asleep, then the law's in place. And well, actually now people are starting to wake up about the Jones Act. I know that right now it's a hot topic, and if you can, please do your research and get behind the movement to get rid of the Jones Act. That concludes our top 10 list of laws that hurt business on Maui. This is the Maui Liberty Network. I am Joe Kent. We're here with Valerie Cisneros. Thanks to Pat Brock and Philip Heath for joining us. If you want to join us or find out more information, you can visit MauiLibertyNetwork.com. Thanks so much, and take care.